something, you know. Okay, Shmuel Aleph, Perek Yud, Pasuk Yud, Perek Yud, Pasuk Yud. So where are we holding? Sh- Shmuel told Shmuel told Shaul to expect several things to happen and to meet several people, and Shaul then turned to go to, on the mission that Shmuel sent him on. Excuse me. And every one of those things came true. Now, one of those things was that Shmuel told Shaul that he was going to meet a group of Nevi'im. And even though the pasuk says that we learn, pasuk test says that everything he said came true, the pasuk still recounts to us the story of him meeting with Nevi'im. Could you get me the shemais of the bereshis of this? Even though it's what? Please, the meeting the Nevi'im is part of the thing. It still spells it out now because of the lessons to be learned from it. So that means that we're looking at this part of the story very carefully because we already said everything happened already. So if you're speaking it out, there must be something important here. So pasuk Yud Vayovoyu Sham Hagivasa, and they arrived there in the Giva where they were headed. V'hinei Chevel, the Giva is Givas Binyamin. V'hinei Chevel Nevi'im Likrasai, and a group of Nevi'im were opposite him. I think I told you about Chevel. Did I? Oh no, and I didn't. I don't think I did. Chevel. What's a Chevel? A rope. Chevel Nevi'im means a group of Nevi'im. It means because it's a rope like binds things together. It's like a cluster, like a group. Somebody once told this to me, very, very interesting thing. Somebody once told me that all ches bezes in the Torah have to do with connection. A chaver or chavrusa, ches bez. Chevel is a rope, whether it's chevel meaning a group or it's chevel meaning a rope. A chabura is a wound, so it's a harder impact, but it's still a connection. How do you say a hug? Chibuk is a hug. Chiba is love. Every ches beis is connection. Amazing, right? So Chevel Nevi'im is a group of Nevi'im. Likrose, they were coming opposite him. Vatitzlach olav ruach Elokim, and the ruach of Hashem came over him, like lashon of like ringing inside of him. Vayisnabe b'soicham, and he had Nevuah while among them. Okay, Vayihi kol. Okay, we'll have to understand what's happening here. Vayihi kol yoidoi be'itamol shilshaim, and what happened was that everyone, he was home. He was in Sheva Binyamin. So everyone who knew him from the day before or the day before that, Vayiru, they saw Shaul prophesizing, experiencing Nevuah. I think I said the word wrong. How do you say it? It's not prophesizing. Someone's taught me that it's something else. You know how to say it? Okay, I'll get back to you on it. I can't expect you to know English. So they saw the Hine im Nevi'im Niba. He's having Nevuah with Nevi'im. Vayomer Ha'am. And the people said, Isha Re'eyu, a guy to his friend, Mazeh Hoya Leben Kish. What happened to the son of Kish? Hagam Shaul Nevi'im. Is Shaul now one of the Nevi'im? This is a little strange. Like, every time something happens, the Navi has to record the hak to us. This is a little strange. What's going on here? Let's continue a little. Vayan ish misham. So someone from there said, Vayomer, and he said, somebody got up in the group and said, Umi aviyam, and who's their father? Who's their father? What does that mean? Al kain hoysel mashal. And therefore it became a mashal. It's something that you say. It became a phrase to say. Hagam Shaul Banavim. And the taka is a phrase you should know by sophisticated people. Like if you'll see, like let's say you have a guy, and one day you see that he's walking. There's a group of Hasidim, and your friend became Hasidish. You'll say Hagam Shaul Banavim, or someone decides to take apart it. So imagine that Dovey walks in one day, hat, jacket, and sits down on the front table over here. So someone might say Hagam Shaul Banavim. Really, Azoi? Yeah. You're part of that chevra. So that's Hagam Shaul Banavim. Rabbi say, what is going on over here? Vayichal me his nabois, and he stopped the Nevuah. Vayavai habama, and he came to the bama. We'll see about that, Be'ezer Hashem, next time. So I'm going to go in a few layers here, okay? First of all, I want to say the Pashut Pshat. And then I want to say a little bit of the deeper Pshat. And then I want to ask a kasha from a Ramban. And then I want to say a little bit Ashkafa. I want to say the thing that Michelle came to hear. Okay, so like this. Pashut Pshat, first of all, is like this. The Mefarshim explain that there are two aspects that could help a person become a Navi. One of them is that he's educated in the home of a Navi. He's in a Navi family, in a Navi Messiah. And if he brought up in the home of a Navi, it's easier to grow up and become a Navi. And it's true. That's the natural way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. Personally, it's interesting. When I was 32, I became a Rav. And I've been trying ever since to figure out what exactly it means to be a Rav and to do those things. My father is an enormous Talmud Chacham, but he's not a Rav, nor does he want to be. I did not grow up in the home of a Rav. I didn't grow up with a father that gives speeches on Shabbos or has to deal with Mispalalim. I didn't grow up that way. So I don't know what that guy is like. And suddenly I'm that guy. I don't know what to do. And what's interesting, it's not interesting, I'm just saying this for Dovi will appreciate this. I know what to do on the outside. Because I've seen Rabbanim, so I know what to do. But I don't know how to live that way. What kind of pajamas do Rabbanim wear? I don't know. What do they do for fun? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I reached the point where I don't care. But, okay, that happened later. But it's interesting that there's a chinuch, speak to Rabbi Ben Zion, like you grow up in the home of a Rav, it's a little bit easier to that world. You know what that means. You speak to children of Rabbanim, they know. And very often I have chaverim who they're Rabbanim and their fathers are also Rabbanim. I have a little bit of a jealousy to them. Easy for you to figure it out. You grew up in that world. So that's what they're saying here. Mazeh hoya leben Kish. What happened to the son of Kish? Shaul was the son of Kish. Kish wasn't the Navi. Mazeh hoya leben Kish. How did that happen to Ben Kish? And then Hagam Shaul Banavim, because there's a second way to become a Navi. Nevuah is not just you grow in Torah until the point that you become a Navi. You could grow and grow and grow and never become a Navi. Because Nevuah demands a certain kind of hisbaininus and being alone with Hashem and purifying yourself in a certain way. There's a certain amount of developing a certain, almost like in Ruchnias, a certain kind of personality and midah and talent to be the type of person to be a Rav, to be a Navi. And Shaul wasn't that guy. Shaul was taking care of his father's donkeys. He wasn't Navi trained. So that's the two things here. Mazeh hoya leben Kish. Hagam Shaul banavim mimanavshach. He didn't learn it at home, and it's not his personality. So the response was, Vayan ish misham vayomer umi avihem. Look at the other Nevi'im. Who are their fathers? Meaning, not every Navi learns it from his father. There are some people that they just do it on their own, I remember when I was younger, I heard from a big Talmud Chacham about this group of Rebbes that were talking to each other. And each one was talking about how holy their father was. My father, the Rebbe, Aleph Shalom, used to be a Baal Moifis and used to, whatever. And there was one Rebbe there who became a great, great, great Rebbe. His father was a baker, not a Rebbe. And when it came to his turn around the table, like, what's he going to say? He's like, my father taught me that there's nothing more important than a fresh bagel. He was saying it as a mashal also, not just, but yeah, Humi Avim, who are the Nevi'im's father? Our fathers are wonderful, but we're not meshubit to be exactly like them. That's not we could pick things up outside also. So therefore, the phrase that became famous was Hagam Shaul Banavim. Because the fact that his father wasn't a Navi, that's not so surprising. But how did he become a Navi? That's the surprise here. Okay? Now, when I learned this, I was going nuts because I'm so anti people hack about things and schmooze about things and this and that. I'm learning Navi and we're quoting that the people that knew him, they were talking and they would say, you heard? You imagine that? You like those guys? You heard what's going on? Shaul's a Navi. Oh, Shaul's a Navi? Yes, really? How did those guys wind up in my Navi? There must be some lesson here. There must be some real hispilus here. And it occurred to me something, and for the first and only time in my life, I think I was mechamed to a zayar. I found a zayar that says something that sounds a lot like what I'm saying. A melech, the Rosh Hashiva always quotes the Drashas Haran that describes that, and I've talked to you about this also in earlier shiurim, the role of a king. You have in Klal Yisrael two leaders. You have the Sanhedrin and the Melech. The role of the Sanhedrin is to worry about the spiritual state of the people. The role of the Melech is to worry about the practical state of the people. The taxes, wars, bridges, tunnels. Now, that doesn't mean that the Melech doesn't have to be a holy person. The Melech has to be, in a way, maybe in a certain sense, more holy. Because the Melech has to understand what Hashem wants in those cases. It's easy to know if Hashem wants you to kasher your pot. But to know if Hashem wants you to raise taxes, that's not so easy. The areas of our lives that are divrei reshus, that's, sometimes you want to look at Shulchan Aruch and see what to do. That's easy. What the hard part is when it doesn't say it in Shulchan Aruch. That's when you have to grow. That's the Melech. That's why the Melech had to walk around holding a Sefer Torah. The Kara boy kol yemei chayav. Because he has to stay so attached to Torah that the hashkafa of the Torah, the value system of the Torah, affects even the mundane things that he does. But Seif Kol Seif, that means that the king has to be able to be with the people, connected, engaged with the people. The Navi is not that type of Talmud Chacham. Klal Yisrael is blessed, and that's why I don't like when people try to stereotype or try to say that everyone has to be the same. We are permitted to have different Talmidim. You are permitted to have two Rabbeim that are so different from each other that they can't look at each other, and you can have both of them. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Klal Yisrael a broadness, and that broadness means that we have Nevi'im who are misbaided and spend time alone, and they're living in a Ruchnius Diko cloud, and they're connected to the Dvar Hashem. And you can have another Talmud Chacham that his way is that he can chap every person and he can make jokes and he knows what's going on, knows what's going on in the world, and he's also holy, and he's also doing everything l'shem shamayim, and he's also doing everything from the Sefer Torah that he's holding. But it's a different personality in the service of Hashem. It's almost time for Meir. We have 10 minutes. I don't want to spend too much time, but I have other examples of this difference. If you remind me another time, I'll tell you of this difference between different types of Talmidei Chachamim, and there's probably many types. I'm just, broadly saying two types, but there's probably hundreds of types of Talmidei Chacham, and it's important because sometimes we're judgmental about a Talmud Chacham instead of recognizing that he's that type of Talmud Chacham. And Klal Yisrael needs many different kinds of Talmidei Chachamim. The chiddush here is that Shaul was preparing to be a melech. He was a feet on the ground kind of guy. And that's why he was the one. He's looking for his father's donkeys. He's very, very down to earth. Very, very dealing with the regular, normal things. And suddenly he's Navi? Hagam Shaul Banavim. It's not stam the hackers in Shul were hacking. It was a fundamental Tumiyah. Really? Shaul Banavim? How could that be? I found a Zohar that says that never, besides for Moshe Rabbeinu, was there a Navi that was a Melech. And that's why they were so nispel, and they said Hagam Shaul Banavim. Shaul doesn't go on to continue to have Nevuah, to the best of my knowledge, but he had this incident of Nevuah, and the pliya was because besides for Moshe Rabbeinu, who Yesh Ladun, how much Moshe Rabbeinu is considered a Melech, but Melech and Navi never combined. Fascinating, no? And that's why it was such a Pella. Okay? Before I get to the point that I want to mention before we daven Ma'ariv, I want to just tell you that I have a kasha, and I love this kasha because it's a bit of an exotic kasha. I have a raya that David HaMelech was a Navi. And that would be a kasha, no? We just said there's no such a thing. I don't have an answer. Where's my kasha from? Because the Ramban, before he started his Pirush on Chumash, he wrote an introduction. And in the Hakdama to the Ramban's Pirush on Chumash, he mentions a pasuk in Tehillim. And when he mentions the pasuk in Tehillim, he's writing in rhyme. The first paragraph is writing in rhyme. Aschil lichtov chidushim bepirush haTorah be'ema be'yira bereses bezeya u'bemoira, and so on and so forth. He's going in rhyme, and he's quoting a pasuk in Tehillim. So how does he refer to David HaMelech? So he says, Ka'asher Omar Hanavi HaMefayer Bilvush Malchus V'ha'atara. As the Navi said, who was glorified with wearing a Lavush Malchus and a crown. And then it quotes a pasuk in Tehillim. Which Navi is that? It's David HaMelech. So you see, the Ramban calls, that's great, the Ramban calls David HaMelech a Navi. V'tzarech iyun gadol. Okay? What I want to mention is a little bit of a sensitivity. This is not, it's more of a hashkafa, broader thing. It's not something, that's necessarily negay on the day-to-day. I just want to bring up the hashkafa. We've been learning that Shaul had to meet different kinds of people. He had to meet people that were mevakshim. He had to meet people that were not interested in Torah. He had to meet people that were even Rishoim on his journey. And he met all of those people, and we understood that the idea was that the Melech has to know how to meet and interact with each Yid based on his madrega, where he's up to, and what he needs next. And not to confuse, and not to expect everyone to be the same or everyone to be perfect, but to have the versatility and the subtlety to be able to meet people where they are. The Melech needs to be able to do that, as I explained. But what does the Melech need Nevuah for? Why does Hashem want Shaul HaMelech to experience Nevuah? I think that it's important to realize that the Rav, or the Rebbe, or the Ben Torah, that finds that his personality lends itself to being able to interact with a broad variety of people, and not just the people on the highest level. The Rav that has the versatility to be able to be friends with someone who's not religious, with someone who has resentments to religion, with someone who's learning a little bit, with someone who's on a journey, with someone who's struggling, and Klal Yisrael needs people like that. He shouldn't consider himself less responsible internally to fully connect with the Rabbeinu Shalom because he's on college campuses. I don't mean this campus, I mean he's out there doing kiruv. I feel like sometimes in life, people that are doing certain things, so there are guys doing kiruv on college campuses. That's awesome. That's amazing. It's necessary. It's saving Klal Yisrael. There are generations of from people because of it. Maybe some people are here because of someone who did kiruv on a college campus. Okay, that's for sure. Klal Yisrael owes. I know some of them. Klal Yisrael owes them a debt of gratitude, but they have to be careful that they don't consider themselves more pater from Talmud Torah than Rav Marcus, who gives a shiur learning Yom V'Layla in Beis Medrash Talmud. Their own personal connection to Hashem can't suffer because they've taken it upon themselves to interact with a more struggling element of Yiddishkeit. Internally, we're all the same, fiery about Torah and engaged with Torah. I want to tell you a story that once happened, a little bit of an interesting story. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference of Rabbanim. And going to conferences of Rabbanim is very, very interesting. Okay, I always get a kick of watching all the Rabbanim davening and wondering who's going to wait for who, you know? You have a room full of people that are used to being waited for. You know, it's just funny to me, you know? So I was by this conference, and it was like, the Rabbanim were talking by some kind of a presentation about Rabbanus. And Rabbanim deal with a lot of things. You know, there's a lot of things. It's not for now, but there's a lot of traumatic things, a lot of difficult things. The life of a Rav is not a simple life. But sometimes there are certain kinds of resentments that develop that Rabbanim have that they really have to move on. And one of those things is that Rabbanim complain. You know what I'm about to say? Rabbanim complain that when guys come home from yeshiva, they don't respect the Rabbanim anymore. Guys go off to yeshiva, they come back from some yeshiva, who knows where. Suddenly, they look at the Rav, they look at their Rebbe in yeshiva, they're like, come on. So the Rabbanim were venting. These Bachrim come back, they don't listen to a drasha, they don't come back around to say good Shabbos anyway, they know better. I was thinking to myself, I don't find that with the Bachrim in my shul. I have a great kesher. You've been there. I have a great kesher with them. I just don't find that at all. I don't know what they're talking about. They listen to my drushes, and I was with them and learning. I don't find that. But I didn't say anything because I was like a younger Rav, and they were all getting into it. And finally, there's one guy. I still remember who it is. He's about my age. He's been a Rav for many years. A huge Talmud Chacham, very quiet guy, and apparently he couldn't restrain himself. He gets up in the back of the room, and he said, very gently, I noticed that if the Bachrim appreciate that you also know how to learn, they do give you respect. And in a very gentle way, I think what he was trying to say was, this guy is a massive Talmud Chacham, what he's trying to say was, do you know how to learn as well as the guy's Rebbe? Are you as connected as the guy's Rebbe? Okay, there's nobody else around, it's just us Rabbanim. Are they right? You know, maybe they're coming from a world where Rav Sachs is giving them shiur, and then you come home and the Rav is using an art scroll chumash on the bottom to say his drasha, and you're like, okay, I'm not that impressed. And if you're going to use the art scroll chumash, you got to at least quote it Baal Peh. Maybe that's the case. Now, am I here to criticize Rabbanim? Of course not. I'm here to say a certain nikud. The Rabbanim are working very hard, and sometimes they're pushed to the limits, and it's very difficult. I'm just talking here to maybe future Rabbanim. I'm talking here to people that are b'nei Torah and holding and learning, that we have to hold ourselves to a standard, that we always consider ourselves part of the Olam HaTorah. And we don't say, yeah, I'm a Rav of a shul somewhere in the outskirts of some city. My Mispalim don't know much anyway. If I could read Rashi and Ramban, I'm good to go. I have a vart for every parsha because my guys didn't look in Rashi. If we settle for that, we're creating a backwards thing. We're creating a matzav where instead of the Talmidim growing and climbing and grasping to grow to meet the Rabbeim are settling to where the Talmidim are, chas v'shalom. That's how I understand. Shaul HaMelech, meet all the people. Now I want to see you being misnabe and connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu like any Navi, because you never give up that dveikus to Hashem just because you have to have boots on the ground. Yashikayach.